Few writers have left such an indelible mark on the literary world as Franz Kafka. His works are synonymous with existential dread, strange surrealism, and complex explorations of identity and alienation. But beyond the words and worlds he conjured, Kafka himself was a man of contradictions, introverted yet groundbreaking, uncertain yet visionary. His life was as enigmatic and unsettling as the stories he wrote, with an intense internal conflict that shaped his literary genius. Born in Prague on July 3, 1883, Franz Kafka entered the world as a child of privilege, yet the demands and expectations of his family became a suffocating weight that shaped his existence. Kafka's father, Hermann Kafka, was a domineering, authoritative figure who demanded success and respectability, traits Kafka could never fully align with. His mother, Julie Kafka, though kinder, played a passive role in his life, leading Kafka to feel isolated and misunderstood. The influence of these two parental figures set the stage for Kafka's inner battles and artistic conflicts, which would later manifest in the form of alienated protagonists, terrifying bureaucratic systems, and labyrinthian worlds. From an early age, Kafka was often caught between the dual expectations of his family and the oppressive atmosphere of his environment. In his diary, he confessed to a deep sense of inadequacy and helplessness, feeling that he could never live up to his father's expectations. This sense of alienation was not limited to his family life, but rather permeated his existence in almost every realm. The city of Prague, with its history of Jewish persecution and cultural tension, was a place of great beauty and profound isolation for Kafka. Even in the company of others, he struggled with a pervasive sense of being an outsider. This would become a central theme in many of his works, characters who are overwhelmed by forces beyond their control, struggling to understand the strange, often hostile worlds in which they live. Kafka's early education was marked by a deep intellectual curiosity, and he attended the German University in Prague, where he studied law. Though Kafka was never enthusiastic about the practical aspects of law, he recognized that it offered stability and a respectable career. He earned his law degree in 1906 and began working in the insurance industry, where he was employed for most of his adult life. This career, which involved assessing workers' compensation claims, allowed Kafka to lead a relatively comfortable life, but it also deepened his sense of entrapment. His desk job, with its tedious routines and hierarchical bureaucracy, mirrored the oppressive systems that would later dominate his fiction. Yet, despite his dissatisfaction with his career, Kafka continued to write prolifically in his spare time. Throughout his life, Kafka was drawn to the notion of freedom, yet he never fully embraced it. He was perpetually torn between the pressure to conform and the longing to express himself. His diaries from this period revealed the tension he felt between the desire for personal liberation and the fear of the consequences of pursuing that freedom. Kafka's letters to his friends, especially his confidant and editor Max Brod, reveal a deep struggle with his sense of identity. He was a man of paradoxes, capable of great intellectual insight, yet plagued by self-doubt and an overwhelming sense of inadequacy. Kafka's relationships with women were also fraught with complexity. He often found himself involved with women who seemed to represent ideals of freedom and escape, yet he was terrified of intimacy and commitment. His engagement to Felice Bauer, which lasted for several years but never culminated in marriage, is a testament to his ambivalence. Kafka's intense need for solitude and his inability to connect with others on a deep emotional level are key elements in understanding the tortured nature of his personal relationships. Even as he longed for love, he often retreated into his isolation, afraid that true connection would ultimately lead to pain and disappointment. This constant push and pull between connection and isolation, freedom and constraint, would become a driving force in Kafka's writing. His works are filled with protagonists who grapple with existential dilemmas, unable to break free from systems that seem designed to trap them. Perhaps the most famous example of this is The Trial, a novel that centers around Joseph K., a man who is arrested and tried for a crime that is never revealed to him. The novel is a chilling exploration of the absurdity of bureaucratic systems and the alienation that comes from living in a world where nothing seems to make sense. Despite his personal struggles, Kafka's creative output during this time was prolific. His works, though often incomplete, explored themes of powerlessness, the search for meaning, and the complexity of human relationships. His stories, such as The Metamorphosis, The Judgment, and In the Penal Colony, introduced readers to worlds where the familiar laws of society, morality, and logic no longer applied. These works gave voice to the deep sense of alienation Kafka felt throughout his life, but they also spoke to the universal human experience of grappling with the unknowable forces that shape our existence. Yet, despite Kafka's growing literary reputation, he remained largely unknown during his lifetime. He published only a handful of short stories, and many of his works were either left unfinished or unpublished. Kafka himself expressed doubt about the worth of his writing, often dismissing it as unimportant. His reluctance to publish his works, coupled with his fear of being misunderstood, meant that many of his writings were not seen by the public until after his death. As Kafka grew older, his health began to decline. In 1917, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a disease that would plague him for the remainder of his life. He spent the final years of his life in and out of hospitals, battling both his physical illness and his deepening sense of despair. During this time, Kafka's writing became even more introspective and surreal. His later works, including the unfinished The Castle and America, reflect a growing sense of alienation and frustration with the inability to ever truly understand the world around him. Franz Kafka died on June 3, 1924, at the age of 40. His life, though short, was one marked by a profound sense of isolation and a relentless search for meaning in an indifferent world. But in the years following his death, Kafka's work gained recognition, and he became one of the most influential writers of the 20th century. His works continue to resonate with readers today, offering a glimpse into the human condition and the struggle to find meaning in a seemingly senseless world. Kafka's life was a paradox, a brilliant writer trapped in the confines of his own mind and circumstances, forever searching for answers in a world that seemed determined to keep him from finding them. His legacy, however, is undeniable. His works have inspired countless readers and writers, and his exploration of the human condition remains as relevant today as it was during his lifetime. Kafka's ability to capture the absurdities of life with such depth and poignancy ensures that his stories will continue to be read and studied for generations to come. As Franz Kafka's health deteriorated and his time on Earth dwindled, his inner world seemed to become even more profound, intensified by the reality of a life spent in self-exile and searching for meaning. The last years of his life, although marked by physical illness, were a period of intense self-reflection and an unparalleled focus on his writing. Kafka's condition worsened as tuberculosis ravaged his body, yet his desire to write and create never ceased. Perhaps it was his imminent mortality that drove him to refine his works, pushing him to seek something in his writing that he couldn't find in life: clarity, freedom, and resolution. In the years before his death in 1924, Kafka wrote some of his most haunting and incomplete works. His famous novel The Trial, a story of Joseph K.'s absurd and unknowable trial, captures the essence of Kafka's feelings of alienation, fear, and frustration in a world that seems both cold and inexplicable. The novel, like much of Kafka's work, is filled with nightmarish scenarios and philosophical quandaries, all set in a shadowy bureaucratic maze that evokes a sense of helplessness that many of his readers could relate to, both then and now. His writing mirrored his own life, a continuous struggle to assert control in a world that seemed designed to prevent any such thing. Though The Trial would go on to become one of Kafka's most recognized works, it was never completed. The novel's fragmented structure and ambiguous ending reflect Kafka's internal conflicts and his general sense of frustration at the inability to find closure, either in his personal life or his writing. Even as Kafka sought meaning, his life appeared marked by a constant paradox. The more he searched for answers, the more elusive they seemed. During this period, Kafka's relationships with women also became a source of reflection in his writing. Kafka was deeply introspective, but his desire for love and connection was often thwarted by his fear of intimacy and the unresolved complexities of his past. His engagement to Felice Bauer, which lasted several years, highlighted his difficulty with commitment. While their relationship was full of emotional highs and lows, Kafka's withdrawal, avoidance, and frequent breaks from Bauer were symptomatic of his inability to reconcile his need for love with his fear of dependence and rejection. Kafka's relationships were often marred by an inability to connect fully with those around him. His relationship with his father, Hermann Kafka, is often cited as one of the most influential and formative in his life. Kafka's father was a life and death figure, both physically and symbolically, casting a long shadow over Kafka's development. Hermann Kafka was an authoritarian, a businessman who had little patience for the introspective and somewhat aimless nature of his son. The father-son dynamic was strained, with Hermann Kafka continuously pushing Franz to become more assertive, more successful, and more masculine in a traditional sense. Kafka, in contrast, was sensitive, introspective, and intellectual, qualities that his father saw as weaknesses rather than strengths. In his letters to his father, which were written in an attempt to confront and understand their relationship, Kafka reveals the deep scars left by his father's harshness. These letters, written with vulnerability and raw emotion, stand as a testament to Kafka's struggle with the expectations of masculinity and his fear of rejection. The anxiety and emotional torment Kafka felt in his relationship with his father undoubtedly informed much of his later works, where fathers often appear as figures of authority, control, and even oppression. As Kafka battled with his physical health and the emotional weight of his family relationships, his professional life remained both a source of stability and a continuous source of dissatisfaction. His job at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute was secure, but Kafka felt trapped in the monotony of insurance work. His job involved reviewing compensation claims for injured workers, which, while offering financial stability, seemed to Kafka to be a monotonous, soulless exercise in bureaucracy. This job, along with his constant battle with his health and self-doubt, contributed to Kafka's existential frustration. In his diaries, Kafka frequently reflects on the seeming futility of his day-to-day existence, his struggle to break free from the routines that shackled him. Yet, despite these overwhelming challenges, Kafka's work ethic remained relentless. He continued to write, often in secret, as if in defiance of the oppressive forces that sought to silence him. In addition to The Trial, Kafka worked on The Castle and America, both of which reflect his unyielding search for answers in an indifferent world. The Castle, which depicts a character named K trying to gain access to a mysterious castle, serves as another allegory for Kafka's ongoing struggle with authority, identity, and bureaucratic systems that felt insurmountable. The novel, like many of his works, ends unresolved, highlighting Kafka's own ambivalence about closure and meaning. Kafka's health continued to decline throughout 1923, and he was often confined to bed for long periods. His writing during this time became increasingly introspective, a direct result of his limited physical capabilities. He became more withdrawn, spending long stretches in his apartment, pondering the futility of his situation. Despite his illness, Kafka's creative output didn't cease, even though his health continued to deteriorate rapidly. He wrote extensively in his diaries, wrestling with his ideas about life, death, art, and meaning. His introspection reached new depths, and his reflections became even more poignant. In late 1923, Kafka's tuberculosis became life-threatening. His once productive life was marked by a painful descent toward death. He continued to write in the last months of his life, but by this time many of his works were unfinished. America, also known as The Man Who Disappeared, is one of these unfinished novels, leaving readers with a sense of unfulfilled potential, mirroring Kafka's own feelings of not having fully realized his own life's potential. The sense of incompletion that permeates his writing seems to echo the life Kafka led, a man constantly searching for meaning, yet never quite grasping it. Kafka died on June 3, 1924, at the age of 40. His passing was the end of a life marked by internal conflict, isolation, and a ceaseless quest for understanding. But Kafka's death was not the end of his influence. It was only after his passing that Kafka's works began to be published, primarily due to the efforts of his close friend and confidant, Max Brod. Kafka had instructed Brod to burn all of his unpublished manuscripts after his death, but Brod defied his wishes and instead published them, allowing Kafka's works to enter the public consciousness. Despite Kafka's hesitations and self-doubt, his works would go on to become some of the most influential texts in modern literature. Kafka's exploration of existential themes, his depiction of oppressive systems, and his examination of the human condition in a world that seems indifferent to individual suffering, resonated with readers in profound ways. Kafka's works, though incomplete, have stood the test of time and continued to challenge readers to think deeply about the nature of identity, society, and the forces that shape our existence. Kafka's legacy is not just found in the books he wrote, but in the way he wrote them, in the raw honesty of his self-reflection and the unflinching portrayal of a world that can often feel meaningless. Kafka was not merely a writer. He was a visionary, a man who sought to articulate the inner workings of the human soul in all its vulnerability, confusion, and yearning. After his death in 1924, Franz Kafka's legacy began to grow, propelled largely by his devoted friend and editor, Max Brod, who ignored Kafka's last wishes to have his unpublished manuscripts destroyed. Brod's decision to publish Kafka's works, despite Kafka's request, was one of the most significant acts in the history of 20th-century literature. The publication of The Trial, The Castle, and America, among others, cemented Kafka's place as one of the most influential and mysterious writers of his time. Kafka's works, often strange and unsettling, painted a world in which individuals struggle against faceless bureaucracies, oppressive authorities, and existential despair. His protagonists, often isolated, searching for meaning, and trapped within confounding systems, resonated deeply with readers worldwide. At the heart of his stories was the existential question: what does it mean to be human in a world that often feels indifferent to personal struggles? Kafka's writing does not provide easy answers. In fact, it often leaves readers with more questions than solutions. But it is this very ambiguity and complexity that has allowed Kafka's work to endure and evolve over the decades. His stories have been interpreted and reinterpreted across various disciplines, from literature and philosophy to psychology and sociology. The term Kafkaesque now a staple in modern lexicon, refers to situations that mirror the absurdity, alienation, and oppressive bureaucracy found in his work, emblematic of Kafka's uncanny ability to capture the absurdities of the modern human experience. Kafka's life was one of constant self-doubt, but his work has become a touchstone for understanding the complexities of the human condition. His introspection, his sense of alienation, and his unyielding quest for meaning in a seemingly chaotic world continue to inspire readers, thinkers, and artists. Kafka's stories, particularly the Metamorphosis, the Trial, and the Castle, are not just stories about the individual, but reflections on the larger social structures that shape our lives, structures often beyond our control and understanding. The tension between the individual and the system is central to Kafka's work. His protagonists often find themselves powerless against forces they do not understand and cannot change. This sense of helplessness, combined with Kafka's meticulous attention to the inner workings of the human psyche, has made his stories both universally relatable and profoundly unsettling. His works speak to the individual's struggle against larger social structures and the existential isolation that often accompanies that struggle. These themes resonate today, as many people feel trapped in systems beyond their control, be they political, social, or economic. Kafka's impact on literature cannot be overstated. His influence is seen in the works of writers like Albert Camus, Samuel Beckett, and Jorge Luis Borges, who also explored the absurdities of existence and the limitations of human understanding. Kafka's exploration of alienation, isolation, and the quest for meaning in a seemingly indifferent universe laid the groundwork for much of existentialist and absurdist literature. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of Kafka's life and work is the deep empathy with which he approached his subjects. Despite the bleakness of his stories, there is a profound understanding of human vulnerability. Kafka's ability to explore the darkest corners of the human psyche without judgment but with deep compassion is what gives his work its enduring power. Kafka didn't write to provide solutions. He wrote to explore the questions, the fears, and the complexities of human existence. Even after all these years, Kafka's work still speaks to readers. The sense of alienation, the questioning of authority, and the feeling of being trapped in a system that defies logic are themes that remain ever relevant. In a world where individuals continue to grapple with existential questions, Kafka's stories offer both a mirror and a mystery, revealing the human condition in all its complexity and beauty, but leaving much for the reader to interpret and question. As Kafka himself once said, "A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us." Kafka's works have certainly acted as an axe, breaking through the barriers of conventional thinking and offering readers a window into the complexity of the human soul. His life may have been short and filled with inner turmoil, but his literary legacy continues to endure, challenging us to confront the fundamental questions of existence. Kafka's life, much like his work, was a study in contrasts, between light and darkness, between freedom and constraint, between solitude and connection. He may have lived in isolation, but through his words he has touched millions, leaving behind a legacy that transcends time and place. And that wraps up the fascinating life of Franz Kafka, an icon whose exploration of human struggles and existential questions still resonates today. If Kafka's world of surrealism and mystery intrigued you, don't forget to hit like, share this story, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. What's your favorite Kafka story, and how has it shaped your view of the world? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay curious, keep questioning, and join us next time for more deep dives into the minds of legendary figures.